All right, so here we are at the city of David. This is the main part, but that slope on those stones there, can you see where I'm pointing now, is the ramp. It's called the glacis. It goes all the way down and disappears further down, and it supports a structure that would have been up the top here. So the idea was that the palace of Solomon or David or whatever it was would have been somewhere up the slope here. The problem is, and you could see the fence running over there, that's where the excavation boundary ends. And there are houses on the other side which cannot be moved. So that's how close we are to finding the original settlement of David and Solomon. Just a few meters, but it belongs to somebody else's property. And they haven't been persuaded to sell to be excavated. But this structure was originally dated, and the wall as well. The two structures were dated together by a woman called Kathleen Kenyon, excavated in Jerusalem in the 1960s. And she dated the structure to the Greek period, the Hellenistic period. And in 1980, on the basis of the pottery that I found personally, they then redated it to the much earlier period, to the time of David and Solomon. So suddenly you had a structure, and it was the first time anywhere in Jerusalem there was a structure that was dated to the time of David. So quite fun. Here we have the biblical passage speaking about David's conquest of Jerusalem. The time came when King David and his men set out to attack Jerusalem. The Jebusites who lived there thought that David would not be able to conquer the city. And so they said to him, "You will never get in here. Even the blind and the crippled or the lame could keep you out." But David did capture their fortress of Zion, and it became known as the city of David. Okay. So that's what the Bible tells us, and we notice it's a personal conquest. It's David and his men. All right, what do we have here? There's Shiloh sitting over there, and here we've got the ramp going up here. Here we've got a section of a house. Another part of the house over here is the second part of the house. It's called a four-roomed house. It's actually a house with a courtyard. And here on its side is a separate little room, and in the middle of that room is a stone square with a depression and a hole drilled through the stone. Any ideas? Took the archaeologists 3 days to work it out. What is this? No, it's a toilet. It's the first discovered Iron Age toilet, dating from about 700 BC. The first Iron Age toilet. Well done, Kevin. So there it is, your Iron Age toilet. This house where the woman is working is called the house of Archeol. Archeol in Hebrew, Ach is brother, Archeol, El is the name for God. God is my brother, or some such description. And that was on the basis of two pieces of pottery that were found and on the floor of that house that had the name Archeol written on. And Shona was scrubbing pottery the one day, cleaning the pottery in preparation for the decoding, the deciphering and so on of the pottery pieces, and they found this for the second time. They found the name Archeol. So great excitement. So it's now called Archeol's house. And there we're in the house. And for those who know Shona, there's Shona roughly 32 or 33 years ago, 35 years ago, goodness me, goes past. We've been married for 40 years, and we went to celebrate at Victoria Falls this week. So that's Shona. She went quite reluctantly on this dig. She thought, what on earth do I want to go and spend a month in Israel digging? At the end of 2 weeks, I said, I think we should take off a few days to go and tour. She said, you must be mad. I said, what do you mean? She said, I want to dig. I'm finding that city wall. And so she had we had a great time together. We went back subsequently. Those two pillars are original. There would have been another 2 pillars to hold the roof, and that's Archaeol's house. Down below, where this older couple are digging, is another house that's called the House of the Seals, S-E-A-L. And the seals were pieces of pottery that, with the names of 70 different names. And it comes from the time of Jeremiah, and there is Gamaliel, who is mentioned in Jeremiah. So there we have this little clay tablet with a reference to one of the people we know who challenged Jeremiah. There's a reconstruction of Archaeol's house showing the toilet, the house, and the set of stairs. Now, those stairs going up is really part of the street, so there were no major streets, there were just these narrow little alleyways. But that's most likely part of the earliest part of Jerusalem. So you walk on those steps, you know Jeremiah walked up those stairs. And who knows whether David, around in the time of David walked on those stairs. It's not a question of maybe. You know, a lot of the places you go to Israel say, well, this is where Jesus broke the bread, and you think, maybe. What's the chances? 1 in a million. This is 1 of 1. This is a set of stairs. Did Jeremiah walk them? Yes. He lived in Jerusalem. He would have gone up that hill. He would have walked on those stairs. We had a young woman on the dig, well, several students from UCT, and she was, if you didn't feel strong enough to do the heavy dig work, then you would stay back in the house and you would wash pottery. And she stayed back that day. Gina was her name. She was washing pottery with Michelle, one of the other students. Michelle had very severe arthritis, chronic arthritis. She couldn't walk much, but she was on the dig with us. And they were talking about, and Michelle was a Christian, and she, somewhere along the line, she started talking to Gina and realized that this girl was on a journey. And when Gina got back to Cape Town, she went to a church and she said to the minister, in order, I want to join your church. I want to become a Christian. I want to be baptized. And he said to her, why? She said, I've just been to Israel. And we were on the dig, the city of David. She said, I thought David was a story in the Bible. Now, I know he's real. And the Bible's real. Powerful stuff, this archaeology, hey? Okay, that's me. I am right up the top of the glacier.
Can we call you Rocky from now on?
And my job was to spend a week cleaning the stones, dusting them off, picking up pieces of pottery. And it was on the basis of the pieces of pottery that I found during that week that they dated the upper part of the glacis. They dated it to Okay, where my feet are, they dated to the time of the Jebusites, and the part where I'm holding onto with my hands, they dated to the time of David. Well, they're still debating that, but it certainly is no later than that. So Kathleen Kenyon and her Hellenistic ideas were shown to be completely wrong. And so I spent a week up there dropping rocks on people's heads. It was quite fun. Now we come to the actual capture of Jerusalem. And to understand the capture, you've got to look at two important parts. The one on the left-hand side with that set of stairs is called Hezekiah's Tunnel. It's a shaft that runs from the spring of Gihon, which is on the eastern side of Jerusalem, down to the pool of Siloam, which you'll know from John's Gospel, is on the southern part of Jerusalem. It's about 600 meters. It was a tunnel that was dug from both directions. And they met in the middle. And it's not a straight tunnel. It's shaped like a figure S. Now we had mining engineers with us, and they said it boggles the mind. And they had to dig it in a hurry. That's why they were digging from two directions. They had to get that tunnel finished before the Assyrian army arrived. They had to secure their water supply to keep it within the city walls. Otherwise, when the Assyrians arrived, they could cut off the water and the people of Jerusalem would die. So they had to dig this tunnel fast. And you can walk through, and I've walked through several times. You could walk through the tunnel. You could see the pick marks moving right to left, right-handed people chopping. You get to the middle, and it changes direction. You could see the right to the left, but coming from the other direction. And the gap is less than 5 centimeters. So that's how accurate they were. I asked the mining engineers, how did they do it? He said, well, sound travels underground. And in fact, the little text, the memorial text that the engineers of Hezekiah attached to the wall, we're talking roughly the year 700 BC. What they attached to the wall there was when they got close to each other, they could hear the sound of the picks on the rock. And they struck out toward the sound, and the water flowed from Gihon down to Siloam. And the guy said, not knowing about that text, he said sound. You could hear sound about 40 meters underground, maybe more. So that's Hezekiah's Tunnel. On the right-hand side, on your right-hand side, is Warren's Shaft. Charles Warren dug in Jerusalem around about 1880. And one of the things he did, and he was a naughty archaeologist, let me tell you. Why was he naughty? Well, because the Muslims said no digging on the Temple Mount. Charles Warren, like a typical English guy, said, that's quite all right. Walked 50 meters down the slope, dug down, and then when nobody could see him, took a tunnel back up the hill and right up to the Temple Mount. And then he had lots and lots of tunnels, and I'll show you some pictures in a subsequent of the tunnels that Warren dug all around. And this is Warren's Shaft. It's dug, it goes down a steep slope. Shona and I in 1980 were one of the first people to go through it. You go down and eventually you get to a hole in the ground. And it's directly above Hezekiah's Tunnel. So we suspect that the women of Jerusalem, and occasionally the men would go down those stairs and they would lower a bucket or a pitcher down through this hole, down roughly 6 meters into the water, and then pull it up and then fill their water jugs from that. So when the disciples of Jesus are told to follow the man carrying the pitcher of water, guess where he's coming from? He's coming from this spot. Warren's Shaft, it's called. Now, Shiloh thought there is the possibility that they came up the shaft to capture Jerusalem. In the Good News Bible, that day David said to his men, "Does anybody here hate the Jebusites as much as I do? Enough to kill them? Then go out through the water tunnel and attack these poor blind cripples." And that is why it is said, the blind and the crippled cannot enter the Lord's house. And I'll come back to that a little bit. But the word for the water tunnel is the Hebrew tzinor, T-Z-I-N-O-R, tzinor. So Yigal got two Israeli mountain climbers, alpinists, took them into the tunnel, and he said, "Can you climb this?" And they said, "With pleasure." And while we were there, these alpinists climbed up came up in the tunnel and accessed into Jerusalem, what would have been Jerusalem in David's time. So what David did, he had his army down there. In the valley, they crept into the cave of the spring of Gihon. And back from the cave, they followed a series of caves, got up through the roof of the cave, and climbed up through a series of tunnels, and they came out in the shaft, a well shaft. Walked up the stairs, walked into the city, and probably walked down and opened the city gates. David captured Jerusalem without any significant loss of life on David's side. Before the Jebusites knew what was happening, David's army was in control of the city. This is Hezekiah's Tunnel, 700. There's the hole in the roof. So those alpinists climbed here through the hole in the roof. So this is a natural cave. And the natural cave was there before Hezekiah built his tunnel. So they went into the natural cave, climbed up in through the hole in the roof, and accessed Warren's Shaft from the bottom up. It would have had water in it. Those stairs would not have been there. So they would have walked through where those stairs were, crawled through, up the stream into a natural cave, climbed up through the hole in the roof, and accessed into, of course, the top of this shaft is inside the city. So they would have bypassed the city wall and come up inside the city itself. So the Jebusites would not have expected them to suddenly appear literally in the middle of the walled city. And we think it was Joab, so they would have come up through that hole. It was Joab who actually was the one who climbed up, because he then gets promoted to the head of the elite forces of David. This is the other end of Hezekiah's tunnel, the Pool of Siloam. And this is how they found the tunnel originally. They found it from this side. Some little Arab boys in the 19th century were swimming in the pool. One of them disappeared for a long time, then came back saying, "I found something." And it was the entrance, or the exit really, of Hezekiah's tunnel. It's interesting. John's Gospel talks about Jesus sending the blind man to wash in the Pool of Siloam. And it then says, and the Siloam means sent. And that's the editor of John's Gospel putting in his little bit of knowledge. He got it wrong. He got it wrong. There are two tunnels. There's the Hezekiah's Tunnel, which goes to the pool of Siloam. But there's an irrigation tunnel, which they used. And the irrigation tunnel is called the Shiloach Tunnel. And Shiloach means sent. So every now and then, our little editors draw on common knowledge. And obviously over the period of time, that became the understood meaning of the word. This is reading the pottery. This is analyzing the pottery, and there you see Yigal Shiloh and his wife Tammy and their daughter. Now, Shiloh was famous as an archaeologist, but he was also infamous in certain Jewish quarters. The very Orthodox Jews did not like Shiloh at all. They maintained he was excavating a Jewish graveyard and keeping it secret. In fact, if there was a graveyard there, it had been excavated by Kathleen Kenyon and probably by Charles Warren and a whole lot of others. So if there'd been a graveyard there, it wasn't there any longer. And so they actually closed the dig. We were there, and they closed the dig on the Friday. The Minister of Education closed the dig, and the Minister of Archaeology opened it again on the Monday. And so it sounds like South African politics, when they have that collision between the Minister of Fisheries and the Minister of whatever it is. It's if you think the politics in South Africa are fraught, you've got to see Israeli politics. It's just a whole other dimension. The scary thing was that the Orthodox Jews turned out to stone us. And every day for a week and a half, you could hear the shouts of these people, and the police had to create a cordon around our excavation. When Shiloh died of stomach cancer, they partied. They had an all-night celebration because in their opinion, God had struck this man down. So, this is one of the up-and-coming archaeologists. Her name is Eilat Mazar. She was my square supervisor the 1 year we were digging there. Her grandfather was Benjamin Mazar, very famous archaeologist. And Eilat Mazar is the one who is working today. When I say today, at this time, working on the city of David, up there looking for David's palace. So her stuff is very recent. It's 2015, the material she produces on her excavation. Wonderful, young, brilliant archaeologist. And now we're getting to New Testament times. So I'm going to kind of pull some of the pieces together and incidentally hope to link up with what Ruben shared earlier. This is Jerusalem here in the time of Jesus. And you can see there's the city of David there. Still, it's now a prime location. At this stage, it's now the place where the high priest has his palace. So Caiaphas and the rest of them would have lived in this elite suburb. Here's your Temple Mount. Here's your palace of Herod. This section here. So this is Jesus' time. And we know that one of the distinctive things that Jesus did was to go and to drive out the buyers and sellers in the Temple Mount. And this has been for many people, has been one of the difficult texts to understand. Why? What moved Jesus? I've been writing for the last, up until the end of last month, an article on the temple cleansing. Gathering together all the different theories and reading lots and lots of books. I'm going to share with you tomorrow the one find that I made relating to the coins. But today I want to share something different, a different take on part of that. This is Jesus' temple intervention. Jesus went into the temple and chased out everyone who was selling or buying. He turned over the tables of the money changers and the benches of the ones who were selling doves. He told them, "The scriptures say, 'My house should be called a place of worship,' but you have turned it into a place where robbers hide." Two quotations Jesus uses. The first one, Isaiah 56:7. "My house is a house of worship." The second part of the quotation, "But you," and it's interesting, the inverted commas, you notice they've used single inverted commas, so they've signaled the first quotation, only the first quotation. But in fact, the second part, "But you have turned it into a place where robbers hide," is a quotation from Jeremiah 7:11. 6:11? 7:11, oh goodness me, I'd have to check my notes. From Jeremiah. And the word he uses for thief there, the Hebrew word is paritz, 7:11. The Hebrew word he uses for paritz is a very rare Hebrew word. Means violent, destroyer. One of the tasks I was asked to do was to write a series of articles for a theological dictionary. It's called the New International Dictionary of Old Testament Theology and Exegesis, 5 volumes. I was asked to do the words on poverty and wealth. But obviously, for some reason, I must have done a really good job, because they then sent me a contract for another 15 words. So I ended up writing 37 articles in the dictionary, over 100 words on these Hebrew words. Now you must understand, when I did Hebrew, I did it at Wits. And Wits had only modern Hebrew. So I did modern Hebrew, and then what biblical Hebrew I did was through modern Hebrew. So we were lectured on the Sadducees and the Pharisees in Hebrew, or in English, and I wrote my exams in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew. So it's quite a different way to get into the biblical Hebrew. But I was not a good student. I mean, I failed. I did Hebrew prelim, and I did Hebrew 1, and I failed. I had to repeat it. And I thought, isn't it amazing that the struggling Hebrew student writes 37 articles on Hebrew words for an international dictionary. And one of the words was this paritz. And in Greek, it's lestes. And it's the word that Josephus uses for the terrorists of his time, the revolutionaries. And it's the word the New Testament uses for the people crucified on either side of Jesus. And which the English translates as thieves. It's wrong. They're not thieves. They are violent revolutionaries. Okay. Probably part of Barabbas's revolutionary group. So Jesus is crucified on the cross of Barabbas. And to complicate things more, Barabbas means Bar Abba, Aramaic son of the Father. And guess what Barabbas' first name was? Do you know? Jesus. Jesus. So you can imagine the crowd, the choice between Jesus Barabbas and Jesus, the one who calls himself the Son of the Father. I don't think they knew who they were voting for. They didn't, unless You know, it's just one of those interesting things. And the fact that, of course, that Barabbas could say Jesus died for me on my cross. It's a lovely sermon there. Lovely, wonderful Good Friday sermon. But you have turned it into a den of robbers is the English, the Hebrew is a retreat of terrorists, of revolutionaries. And who are the revolutionaries? Well, for Jeremiah, they were the priests. They were the real troublemakers, violent troublemakers. And Jesus uses the same sermon. And tomorrow we'll find out the probable reason why Jesus uses that word. But let's carry on with Matthew's story. That lovely passage in Matthew 21:14. The blind and the lame people came to Jesus in the temple and he healed them. Only found in Matthew's Gospel. Where have we met the blind and the lame? City of David. What did the text say? Because of David's words, the blind and the lame were not allowed into the house of God. You got it? They were not allowed in. There were troops standing at the door to stop the blind and the lame from coming into the temple. And Jesus heals them. Now, if there's ever been a revolutionary gesture, it's that. Jesus going in there and invited the blind and the lame. As the temple police ran away and said, "No, you can't come here, you can't come here." Jesus said, "You healed. You healed." That's the power, the wonderful things you discover through archaeology. So let me close with a prayer and then there'll be a chance to ask questions.